I noticed repeatedly, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. And I think that you're very generous with how you approach the Democrats, as if like there's a few times where it's like, there was a genuine belief of the power of the market and private sector. Like you give them the benefit of the doubt that they really believed that this would benefit vulnerable people, that they really believed that. Whereas I am a lot more skeptical. Like I actually don't think they ever really cared one way or the other about that. They just found niches for all their friends to profit in the private sector.
I think that's a really common view, and one that in certain places I agree with. But and I think that was the sort of the prevailing belief about, especially this sort of brand of Democrats, both by the left and the right. And so one thing I really wanted to show, especially to people on the left, was to sort of understand that this was taken seriously, and it's not the same thing. And I think there's just often this argument that sort of everything that particularly the Clintons was just a pragmatic effort to win elections. And I wanted to show, I mean, I think that that's true in some ways, but that they did really believe in these ideas, and that it didn't just come from a kind of, something of sort of convenience. Or I think that the common way it gets often talked about is this idea of triangulation, which is a belief, the strategy that Clinton adopted in the 1986 election. It was formulated by the famed Dick Morris, which is the idea of sort of stealing the ideas of the right. And so you can see that through things like welfare reform and other kinds of policies, and this idea of like sort of taking the right to win, the ideas of the right to win. And what I want to show is actually that that's not the best way to think about this, that they did really believe that a lot of these ideas could do something, and that you could use the private sector and the market to do good. So one of the things that actually, as you brought up, that the book sort of documents the failures in that approach. But I think it's really important to understand the intent behind it and the faith that this actually could work, because that only proves that reinforces like why it's deeply problematic that they were so they did fail in the ways that they did.
And there is, even if, let's say I were to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, sure, you had all the best intentions, the level of like condescension and elitism that I just get in general from the majority of the policies that they were wanting to put in, all of them, that whole, not just personal responsibility mentality, but very much so like the best way to live is home ownership and investments and giving people access to the stock market, and, just very condescending and very, Eurocentric white, but just very, and not realistic in any way in terms of what people really needed.
Yeah, I think it's a very white middle class view of what would work. And I think there's one of the reasons that's actually why it's caught on in various different ways. I mean, I think a lot of these are really appealing ideas. So in the book, I look extensively at something like microenterprise and microfinance, and that had a huge valence beyond in the tech sectors. You can see it in charter schools, another example of that too. So why particular kinds of people believe in this approach? It's based on their worldview. And so I think there's parts of it that are condescending, but it's also the view, it's the sort of idea of like, I did this, it worked for me. So there's a faith of meritocracy that's behind a lot of these types of policies. And I think that's one of the things that doesn't work. So the market and sort of private sector solutions did work for certain kinds of the population. And we saw huge increases in private wealth being amassed and corporate wealth being amassed over the 1990s, which is sort of the other side of the coin of a lot of these policies. But at the same time, it's not the best solution to solve if you're really trying to solve poverty and inequality and help poor people in need. A lot of these kinds of programs don't necessarily work. And I'll say one other thing about them. A lot of them are not bad ideas in and of themselves. So I think it's fine. I mean, so one of the things I look at extensively is these microenterprise programs, which is trying to help poor, primarily women of color, start their own businesses. That could be fine. I mean, I think that that's a fine idea. The problem is that it doesn't work. It can't replace welfare. And I think that a lot of those types of approaches don't work if you don't have a robust social safety net and social welfare system. And so the idea that you'd replace that program with, you'd replace like the existing social welfare system with these, that's really where it falters.
I think also, and we've talked about this before, this sort of presumption that everybody wants to have their own business, that everybody wants to own a small business, that everybody wants to run a business is just, it's a fallacy. A lot of people really just want to get a job and have a job that pays a living wage. And I think that a lot of these policies, there's an intersection between what they're doing and them also killing labor in the process. Like, it's almost like, okay, if you're only going to be promoting small entrepreneurial business ventures, what about people that just want to get a job? So, I mean, and they really gutted labor as well. Like, this seems to all be simultaneously happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the critical components of it. So it's something with the entrepreneurship program or micro entrepreneurship. And I can give a sort of specific example to think about this. In the 1980s, the Clintons brought to Arkansas Muhammad Yunus, who's the founder of Grameen Bank, which is sort of seen as the person in charge, sort of the inventor of microfinance. And there's questions about how well microfinance works in Bangladesh, but the assumption that sort of, as you said, that everyone in rural Arkansas would want to start their own business in communities that had actually lost most of their manufacturing bases. So they'd had factories there that had moved overseas as part of globalization. What they found actually is that people didn't want to be their own bosses, that they liked working, having a job where they had stability, they had benefits, and all of those types of things were sort of eliminated. And I think that that's the other kind of key piece of this is that you're seeing one thing that I found is over this focus on especially kind of getting people new economy jobs, so tech, finance, and trade, and sort of jobs that are related to trade. Those are all non-unionized sectors. So there's a way that this also prefigures a shift in the Democratic Party away from those types of sectors, but then those jobs just going away. And so I do think it's a way of sort of profoundly weakening labor. Another place you see that is around the promotion of charter schools, and the ways in which those work to weaken both just the sort of fundamental labor, but also the Democratic Party's connections to the labor movement.
And I think the labor movement has been severely decimated, not just as a result of the policies that were enacted initially under Reagan, but I really think a lot of what happened in the Clinton years, particularly with NAFTA and normal trade relations with China, is really what set this thing in motion and really put us behind the eight ball. The question now, because obviously there's been a major, what you would call, I mean, it's obviously in its early stages, but there's been a major labor resurgence in this country on the left. And I trace a lot of that to Bernie Sanders' 2 presidential runs, but we're seeing now the effects of people unionizing at Starbucks, at obviously trying to do some stuff with Amazon, which was obviously huge, what Chris Smalls was able to do in Staten Island. I still think that Walmart is the eye of the hurricane. I think that they are the corporation that needs to be unionized completely. How do you see the labor movement going forward and sort of bringing the Democratic Party back to the roots of FDR, JFK, and LBJ?
Well, I think it's really fundamental, and there's a lot of research that's been shown, or sort of, and history proves that the Democratic Party itself is strongest when it has a strong labor movement behind it. But I think it's also not just about kind of winning elections, and that's kind of critical, but actually getting policies that help working people but help everybody. And so there's often a thing that even if one of the things that happens is even if a small sector unionizes, that can actually affect the entire industry in powerful ways. And I think will force Congress and other places to take action. So I think it's fundamental to have a strong labor movement for going forward, both for the kind of rebuilding of a stable Democratic Party coalition, but also for building up policies that bring sort of fundamental fairness. And one of the things I do think that's happened is there was a period where the Democratic Party, in the first 2 decades of the 2000s, barely even mentioned labor. I noticed this at the 2016 convention. Even Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders did not bring up labor in any kind of convention speech, or it was just not part of the kind of conversation. And I do think the Democrats are starting to pay more lip service to the labor movement. Biden has brought it up routinely. I don't know if we'll see if policies actually go to kind of strengthening labor. And there's a lot of ways, if you look through the platform, it's talked about, but I do think that's sort of fundamental to helping the Democratic Party going forward. So I'm a strong advocate of that approach.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.